Thank you. I know we're the ones keeping you from drinking, so we apologize, but we hope that this session will definitely be helpful for you guys. Just give you some background. Last year, how many people came to DV last year? You're an employee, you don't count. So last year, I gave a speech about the data layer and how important it was to develop the data layer because it's the object that kind of basically fuels all your marketing, from your pixels to your analytics and everything like that. During the speech, one of the most important parts of it was how to get it built, how to build that data, because you got to go through IT, you got to figure out what to do, and do all those different things that are very crucial and very important. After the speech, I got at least 20 to 30 emails from different people, and a lot of people talking to me about, not about how to build a data layer essentially, but how do I get management or the developers or the people in charge to care enough to put that in. And because it is the heart of everything that we do, the data layer part is the heart of everything that we do, I want to spend some time and focus on the political side, how to build the data layer, and as well as how to evangelize it after you get all that done. So kind of take it from beginning to end. So before we get started, I'll let each of these gentlemen introduce themselves and kind of give it their background.
So my name is Brian Gregg. I work in the financial industry. I've been working with business intelligence and data analytics for about 12 years now. And most recently, I've been working at my current employer, building out a solution using Telium and building out a data layer that is being used across about 60 different web properties and collecting data that's streaming out to multiple endpoints, partnering, since I work in a very large organization, partnering with a lot of different departments from IT to business, marketing, and up to the most senior levels.
Hi, I'm Joshua Slotky. My background is quite different. I started in search marketing industry back in 2004, and I was basically part of a two-man team that had to manage the global search for Intel, Adobe, and Lenovo. So we learned very quickly about process, startup, and hacking it to make it work, which is actually something that is carried through very well in Telium. And then I fell into a stint at TurboTax in digital marketing analytics, where I learned quite quickly the complexity that comes into the game when you have to deal with agencies, display, affiliates, SEO, and the search space, of course, and then building into how do you really get personalization. And now I am at Petco. My most recent role was the digital marketing operations and analytics, which is a new role that was created to make marketing work and work well. So Telium was at the heart of that process, and being the first tag management solution after the other 9 years of not having it, very big difference.
My name is Landon. I'm the lead analytics, optimization, and testing for AAA. Essentially, my team says I push buttons all day, so that's essentially what I do. So before we get started, I want to make this a very interactive kind of panel. I think the value of this will be coming from you guys of what's important to you. So I know we all deal with political things, we all have issues, and we definitely want to be here to answer those things. So at any point, raise your hand if there is something that we talked about that kind of hits a cue that you want to ask. Raise your hand and we'll be happy to answer or address those questions. The first thing that I want to talk about is, kind of from the start, from start to the end of how you kind of developed your program. When you started building your data layer, what are those things that, along the process, what have you learned, and what are the advice that you can give some of the people?
So in terms of building a data layer, the first thing you have to do is really build an understanding with your stakeholders around what that data layer is, what its value is, what purpose does it serve. I know coming into this, a lot of the people that we're working with, they're very familiar with tags. They may even be familiar with tag management and with building out solutions using Google Analytics or other tools like that. But to actually understand what that foundational layer is and getting them to understand why that's important, it's a lot of repetition. It's just, in my organization, we have monthly Center of Excellence meetings where we invite all of our key stakeholders. We talk about these topics. We have regular discussions with them when projects come up, any new invest projects. We make sure that it's well understood from the IT teams, from the business teams, the PMs. They understand that this data layer is a critical component of the application and making it successful and being able to integrate in and kind of pull in and put in and pull out these different tags and these different features within your website to be able to make it better for tracking your analytics, tracking your A/B testing, et cetera. So it's education, it's meeting with the stakeholders, and it's making sure that you get that buy-in from all the different areas of the organization.
I gotta ask, how did you get that buy-in? Because I'm pretty sure we're both, from insurance companies.
Yep.
And older insurance companies.
Yep.
And a lot of them aren't very digital focused, or probably digital focused, but probably not in the space where most of a lot of the digital tech companies are. How did you kind of get through the boundaries of getting Telium, going through that path of getting buy-in from stakeholders?
So really what you need to do is you need to kind of sit down with them during requirement sessions. It helps when you have a big project that's being deployed. If you have a brand new property that's being rolled out, or you have a new application that's being deployed either internally or externally, to use that as an opportunity to level set with the group and explain to them that by building this foundational layer and by kind of collecting all of this data about the user experience, about the interactions that they're performing, you kind of talk to them about what that data can then be used for. And it's not easy. It's like I said, that's why we end up having to repeat ourselves over and over again. Constantly be reiterating that value add that these type of tools provide. And eventually you kind of get somebody who's maybe a little bit more forward thinking, a little bit more strategic, who buys in, who adopts the process, and who kind of backs you up on this. And then once that's done, and once you can actually see a successful implementation and you can see what can be done with it, then you start building your roles and responsibilities around that. You start building processes around that, and you start integrating it into your regular deployment activities and building it into your regular project flow. And then getting that PM, the project manager buy-in as well is a big help, because then they can be your biggest advocates, having that ownership over the overall project.
Yeah. Josh, you come from an agency background before and now in more of a corporate, structure in Petco. What are the differences that you see in the political side of, hey, I want to build something, and getting it done from an agency standpoint versus, now at Petco?
I've been in-house at Petco and at TurboTax, and on the agency side, it was a startup mentality, which basically there is no structure, there is no protocol, there is no. You meet with the top person in the organization on a weekly basis, and when the problem is defined, you figure out how to do it with the resources available, and most of the time you don't, which means the tag management system at that time would have been great, but then you find out what can you do within the data that's currently available. Shifting into an organization like Petco, I think that hack it until you can get the resources is still viable. I had a very different experience with learning about managing Telium, in that I adopted in the middle of last year as I was running the search marketing program, and I adopted ownership of Telium in the middle of a platform migration for Petco.com. And so that was leaned heavily on the roadmap that was defined in the early part of the year, and learned much after we launched the platform that you need to have every customer experience so clearly defined as you're defining that data layer. Because I honestly did not know what that customer experience was going to be until I started seeing the dev and QA environments. And at that point, we're having to test every single page on the site just to make sure that the basic data layer is functioning. And that was basically the process. while we were building to deploy, not broken, I was building up the roadmap of what the additional fixes were. And part of that led to us working with developing a three-team ownership of the relationship with Telium, so that the data layer is owned by the web analytics organization. Digital marketing owns the relationship with Telium as it pertains to all of the marketing tags, and I'll continue to own the relationship as it pertains to the site experience, as my new role is on the site experience team as well.
Okay. So I agree with what you're saying there in terms of delegating that responsibility, and that was like a key part of our deployment as well. Our roles and responsibilities are slightly different than yours, but I think that it's very important that up front you delegate out who's responsible for the different relationships, the different development functions, the different the managing which tags are on the page, when they need to be removed, when they need to be retired. Unless you clearly state that, have it well documented, and inform everybody involved of what their ownership is, you're going to be destined to fail. You need to have that established right up front, and you need to make sure that you get that buy-in from different areas. One of the differences in the way that we set it up was we actually turned ownership of managing tags over to our IT team. So they actually use Telium. We had to do a lot of training. We had to get them comfortable with the tools because historically they were the ones who always managed adding tags directly to the page. So by implementing this tool across the organization, we now had to train them, get them up to speed on the tools and how to use them. But now that that's in place, we have kind of a self-sufficient environment, and there's just a lot of gain there.
Just a quick poll of those whose bosses are not in the room, how many of them are struggling with that? Trying to get that step of trying to build the data layer, trying to get more data, trying to build your programs, but those roadblocks are there. So everyone has a perfect. Oh, okay. What are you talking about? You're on my team. All right.
Maybe everybody's boss is in the room.
Oh, that's true. So one of the things that helped a lot as well is when I started at AAA, we really didn't have an analytics program. All we knew was how many people had page views, visits, and uniques. And one of the things that when we started there and we got Telium, one of the hardest things was to get developers on board, getting marketing, getting e-business on board to be able to do those things for me. So one of the important things that we should all consider is to find a champion, at least someone who has influence in the organization. For me, it was, my boss, Seiji's right there. There is also Eric, who's the director of e-business, who also championed the effort of, hey, this is important. We should start little steps, show value from that, whether it's from analytics, whether it's from AdWords, or whatever your campaigns are doing. Take small steps, because for our organization to get it where we are today, it was, a pretty long process. And a long process is building these small wins and getting the influence to be able to get to that next step. I think that applies to anywhere where you're trying to enter, when you're trying to start a new marketing program, where you're trying to implement something different. It's the same thing of trying to find that main influencers and trying to get them to buy into what you're doing. So taking them to lunch, buy them a drink, do whatever you got to do. But in the long run, it definitely helps out on that side. So with the technology stack, I'm pretty sure you at Petco have different technologies. You mentioned you have core metrics, you have different ad systems. How did you kind of evaluate and what your digital technology stack was, and how did you kind of determine what works for your organization?
Well, I don't think that you will ever land on a fixed stack. If you do, you're going to be left behind. My first engagement with Telium was I was tasked with finding a new display remarketing technology partner. It was we had a partnership with Criteo. We wanted to see what else is out there, and they just said go. And so having a solid partner in a feed management technology and partnering with Telium, I was able to deploy 6 different display remarketing technologies, cycling through AOL, Google, eBay, Steelhouse, and Criteo, and I think one more in 6 months. And that was deploying a full set of full visitation, PDP visibility, or product description page tags, as well as full feeds for each of those. And it was the strong partnerships that we had with the feed system and with Telium that allowed me to deploy my own tags as a marketer and have the launch and a test plan run within 6 months that I could never have accomplished if I had to deal with IT. I mean, especially in an organization that is founded in 1965 and the biggest portion of the business is retail. So that was one of the biggest learnings I had is my portion of the business in terms of e-commerce as part of Petco is a rounding error. So I could not rely on getting the IT resources that are dedicated elsewhere, but I no longer needed them. And that was the key for being able to do rapid testing, test and learn process to find the right vendor in the display remarketing space.
Brian?
I agree with what they're saying. That I think it is still important to kind of keep IT closely aligned and lockstep with the things that you're doing, only because I know working in a large organization with applications that are serving, thousands of people, even the slightest impact to performance could mean, loss of conversions. So, you want to make sure that, when you're doing things, even though you're using a tag management system and something that's readily available to your team, you still want to make sure that they're aligned with what you're doing, and they, when you're deploying new tags, there's at least a way for them to keep track of that. So I think that that's part of the sales pitch. What you said right there is you can't rely on a single technology stack. If you rely on a single technology stack, you'll be left in the dust. And by having a tag management system, you do have the ability to quickly change directions, implement new analytics tools, new marketing tools, new campaign tracking services. But I still think you need to kind of at least maintain some level of attachment to your IT teams, just to make sure that they understand the work that's being done. You're introducing JavaScript into their pages. You want to make sure that they know what's going on.
With the stack, one of the biggest things I've seen people tell me is that, hey, we're all organized a little bit differently on who owns what, right? So, for example, as AAA, I own the tag management solution, the personalization engine, and the testing engine, but I have marketing on my back about stuff. I have e-business on my back about stuff. I have, product on my back about all that stuff, IT, and those different things. How are your business set up, or how's your setup like, and how's the relationship there, and how is it important?
So there's definitely a culture of process in a lot of well-established organizations. So by trying to conform as much to that process as possible is going to help with adoption across the organization, because change is scary. Any type of risk that you're introducing into the organization is scary. So if you can adopt those processes, but trying to remain nimble. So by using a tag management system and taking the code deployments out and allowing changes to be made on a more ad hoc fashion, it allows for more quicker deployments, but still you've got to strike that right balance with your organization. Obviously some organizations are more risk averse and they're not going to want to make changes quickly. They're going to want to take their time and do things, whereas the marketing departments may be, pressuring you, we got to get these out. This is, something that has some real value. We need to be able to track this immediately. So I think really it's a matter of balancing that, the quick deployment and the ability to be agile with, the well-established processes that you have in your organization, and the kind of paper trail of things that are changing, and who's accountable and who's responsible for what.
And I think I'm a little bit more fortunate than both of you, since people are less prickly about the PII of their pet than they are about their insurance. And I got thrown into managing tags at TurboTax. Basically, managing tags was using double-click floodlights that were placed throughout the customer experience. And I only brought TurboTax down once in tags and once in a test. But in general, I found that most of the marketing tags tend to be so benign, as long as you have a solid governance on the information that you're prepared to pass back. If you have an ID that is not considered PII or simple hash that can anonymize it, then I have not run into a situation in the last year of me throwing tags up into production as fast as I possibly can without thinking twice about it. I've not run into situations where it's had negative impact on the customer experience. Maybe I've dodged a few bullets here and there. Yeah. But my main focus there on governance is making sure that if it is anything in the cart process, that we're very mindful of the information that passes through. The basic state of digital marketing optimization is that you're giving all of your marketing partners all of your conversions. Pretty much out of the gate, every single one of your digital marketing ad serving partners is going to get every single conversion that takes place on your site. As long as you can get past that and know that you're comfortable knowing that there is governance on both sides, that they're most likely just focusing on the conversions from their programs, then it allows you to be a lot more nimble from a digital marketing perspective, because they do need to turn on a dime. They get executive guidance that now they're optimizing to a new conversion event. And to be able to flip a switch and create a new event without having to build a data layer has been some of the awesome capabilities that we've been able to prove out.
Yeah, I like that. I like that idea of having that ability. So even when you do have tight governance around things, you still have that ability to kind of turn on the dime if you need to. So you know, obviously, like I said, it's a kind of a balance of risk. So you know, if you want, you know, if the need is there and then you do have the capability. So.
And one thing that I'm leaning towards, especially with the new platform, there's a lot of monitoring that's going on to make sure that the health of the site. I'm going the direction of when the marketing tag burden is too heavy, that we should be relying on the IT mechanisms in place to measure that load time and customer experience. That should be the flag, and not us guessing, well, I don't know if I have too many tags on my conversion page or on the cart page, because you won't know. And when I monitor load time, most of the time people don't take into account the fact that the visible content is all the customer cares about. And a lot of the load time measurement tools wait for every single tag to process that your marketing is running or you're running, but none of those are impacting the customer experience. And that the worst case scenario of the customer engaging on the content before all of those load is one of your marketing tags may not be able to load completely for remarketing. But in general, I'm leaning on the IT organization to call for help, or let's say mercy, and then we would audit the active marketing tags. But on the flip side, we also have a quarterly review of all marketing tags, and anything that's not identified as vital is removed.
Yeah.
Brian, you talked about education, kind of the key component in your organization. I think that's a key thing, as well as we were implementing the tag management solution, no one really knew what we do. We just make magic happen, right? We just put up tags and just there in a couple of minutes. But what we saw a lot of value on AAA was being involved in, you know, the AdWords side, being involved in the IT side. When they understand exactly what you can do with, you know, Telium, you know, tag management and AudioStream, being able to set up your marketing campaigns, to be able to customize and then send personalized information, it becomes very valuable. How have you guys kind of communicated the value of Telium to the different parts or the different teams?
Yeah. So it's around speed and agility, right? So when you have a application that has quarterly releases and you need to make changes to that core application every time you need to release a floodlight tag, it's just not sustainable. You're not going to be able to keep up that way. By the time you actually make the change, even if they do it via an expedited release, by the time you make that change, that's already history. That campaign is done. You don't even, you know, it's an afterthought. So really, you need a way to be more agile. You need a way to be able to collect the information that's relevant for these campaigns, for the analytics, and the only way to do that is with some kind of a front-end augmentation tool. Like a tag management system. You can do it in other ways. You can, I mean, there's all kinds of hacks that, you know, we've done in the past to, you know, try to get tags added to the page without having to worry about code deploys. But to have a centralized tool where that's taken care of, to have a conformed data layer that has the dimensions that will ensure, especially with a financial services company, having consistency in your data is very important. So, you want to make sure that when you're looking at conversion counts, you want those to be consistent across your applications. You want those to be defined consistently across your sites. And if you have people doing that within the code, it's not being done in a centralized place. You're not going to have consistency. So definitely an important component of for financial services, and an important component when, eventually if you're looking to go into omni-channel and merge your on and offline data, when you're sending your data to a data warehouse, you want that consistency in your data, because if you have somebody who's looking at things cross channels, you don't want them to have to worry that, well, on this website we're counting it this way, on this website we're counting it this way, so take that into consideration. No, it's being counted the same way because it's being done centrally in an application that's owned by your digital analytics or whatever portion of the organization takes that accountability.
Josh?
Digital marketing does not care about consistency. And that was one of the things that my role at TurboTax and into Petco. At TurboTax, I was on the analytics org as a business analyst for digital marketing. But what I realized actually when the title was official at Petco, it was there's a need for the function of digital marketing operations and analytics. And my role at Petco was actually on the broader digital or the operations and marketing organization, but not part of the digital marketing team. But this role does need to be embedded in the digital marketing org, involved in all the conversations on strategy, planning, and execution. And in doing so, there were times I deployed tags to execute a campaign before the meeting was over where they're discussing strategy. So they would identify that they need to execute a remarketing campaign on an audience for services, for example. They have no cookie pool to market to yet. And they have a campaign they need to launch in 6 days. We need to start building that audience immediately. And I would be able to deploy that before the end of the planning session, because it's a benign tool, cookie that is just basically triggering a tag on a page to identify visitation. And it's one of the easiest to place, but they, without having the function built into the marketing operations aspect, we wouldn't be able to execute on it. And to your point, I was also tied closely with the web analytics team. Mm-hmm. So I was also the one that was taking all of the data that the marketing organization loved to share about how much each channel is driving, and then dedupe it down to what actually they were driving. And by using the web analytics as a point of truth, instead of letting them say, well, Google's said that I brought in this much, and Yahoo's this much, and the display campaigns brought in everything. So that function of a digital marketing operations and analytics role, embedded in marketing and embedded in analytics, was allowed me the access to their planning to execute, to enable them to execute rapid fire when it normally would have been a long turnaround time for them to reach out to the right teams to execute that.
How did the marketing team take it when you told them that their conversions are BS?
They tended to ask me why the core metrics data was wrong first. And usually it comes down to, I think most of the time they know. They know that if I'm ordering a $10 product, it's not going to take me 30 days after maybe seeing an ad to make that buying decision. And this morning session, that the average consumer is seeing 3,500 to 4,500 ads per day, I think it was from Forrester, to make it believable that an ad that you see out of 1 in 4,000 influenced you 25 days later. It's not believable, especially from the view-based attribution. And then from the cross-channel attribution, I completely support digital marketing, all the third-party tags for optimizing the program, because you cannot optimize real time without that. But then you have to take all of those costs and bump it up against your single point of truth. And if it's not tracked, it doesn't exist. So if they've got the lowest common denominator on their agency doing their tagging for their tracking, and it doesn't make it through, it doesn't exist. They will lose their budget.
All right, Brian, you have an analytics background at the Hartford. How did tag management help you, and kind of what is the progression, or what are the big wins that you kind of experienced while using tag management to get a rich data layer? Now you have more data. Can you kind of go into exactly how did you go about in evangelizing that, and how did you actually change the organization's view on analytics?
So from an analytics perspective, historically we were always very centralized, where we had kind of a core team of analysts who reviewed our data, made decisions based off of it, made recommendations based off of it. They kind of owned their line of business and served as the authority over the data, because the systems were complex. There was a lot going on. The tools were very expensive, and it required that that oversight, that ownership. But by moving to a tag management system, we now have the capability of taking that data and serving it up in different ways. So, using a tool like Google Analytics to be able to serve your data, as opposed to using some very expensive centralized tool, kind of gives people more power to be able to make decisions on their own, to be able to analyze the data on their own, as opposed to having to rely on these analysts. Now, that doesn't mean that the purpose of the analyst is no longer served, because they are still the subject matter experts across the channel, understanding all of the data and understanding the offline data that's being merged together.
That's right.
What's that?
That's right.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm an analyst, though.
Yeah. But it is valuable to be able to give people the ability to segment data on their own, be able to look at maybe just their online data independently, and be able to make decisions based off of that on a more ad hoc, as needed basis.
Josh, you talked about briefly about how having tag management helped you fuel a lot of innovation within TurboTax and Petco. What are some things on the marketing side that has helped help you transcend that using TLM tag management tool or anything?
I mean, the speed of deployment and the ability to, the complexity of the marketing program at Petco was something that I was not prepared for. I thought I was coming from sophisticated digital marketing at its best from TurboTax. But what I didn't realize is, what didn't sink in, is that TurboTax, one product, your market is everybody, and there's only one place to get it, is online. Switch to 20,000 products, 1,500 stores, plus 3 web domains, and the fact that the e-commerce organization is a very small part of a very big pie and needs to show the influence. And that was one of the keys, is that being able to make it through a platform deployment and have the testing systems in place, all of the marketing tags in place, and then be able to have the organization be able to focus on that larger infrastructure of that platform, because the e-commerce element of that is really small. We had most of our tags we were able to deploy and test within 4 days during a full platform migration, so that the IT resources could be focused on the bigger issues of being able to manage inventory across multiple systems, really. So that, the efficiency there, it allows us to take the burden off of IT. It's a burden up front, and there's going to be the constant review that you've mentioned in terms of the data governance of how do you manage that data layer properly. But in general, we're using so many third-party tools, software as a service, to influence the recommendations, the testing and personalization, all the remarketing. Every single one of those systems can be managed through a tag management system without ever needing to touch code on your site.
Awesome. Now, that being said, when you start moving towards an omni-channel solution, though, where you're kind of pulling all your data into a centralized source, pulling your online and offline data together, data governance does play a much bigger role. And I don't know if that's something that you've encountered, but I know definitely within our organization, we're finding that as we're starting to integrate our data in with other areas of the organization, in with our underwriting systems and things like that, in with our customer relationship manager tools, We really do need to have that kind of governance around things to make sure that, you're calling a spade a spade. You don't want to be pulling in data from your online data source with a completely different set of governance rules. You want to try to conform with the enterprise as much as you possibly can.
Yeah, that was one of the key elements of the platform that we deployed was all of that, the customer segmentation, audience management, within our loyalty program, all of the purchasing information, that's all in the underlying structure. That will be part and parcel of the foundation of the platform. And the key there is to make sure that we can feed that in through the data layer, so we don't even need to worry about that because that's being managed by elsewhere in the organization, and it's more a factor of how do we feed that into our personalization engine, our customer experience, remarketing. And frankly, I'm planning on leveraging our third-party testing systems and just upload the target audiences that I need to personalize the experience for the customer base I want to focus on. So I may, to your point, it's still a hack, but it's a hack I can do in a week, as opposed to having to work through a 6-month development cycle, and which then at that point I'll just not have to do my hack anymore.
Yeah.